All right, good evening, everybody. It is a few minutes after 5:30. This is our pre-agenda meeting for the town of Spencer for the month of June. We have a busy agenda for tonight with a multitude of public hearings and then a review of our June 11th regular meeting agenda. We do have all of our board members present. We'll begin with an invocation. Father God, we thank you for the season. We thank you for growing crops and gardens and new beginnings all around us. We thank you for this town and our residents and our businesses. And we thank you for the past and our history and the future that lies ahead of us. Be with us as we discern the work of the town and just make decisions for the upcoming year. And be with our staff each day and all that they do. Watch over them, guide them, and protect them. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we're going to dive right into the public hearings. The first public hearing is for our proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. As we get into that, I know each of these public hearings will invite staff to make a few remarks regarding the purpose of the public hearings. And I know the manager, I think, has some comments related to some proposed budget revisions and the revised budget amount and tax rate for the upcoming fiscal year. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much, Mayor Williams and members of the board. We do have a revised budget that we have put together, and we are prepared with an updated ordinance that you can consider next Tuesday. Of course, subject to feedback you'll receive tonight, but what I'd like to do is share in advance of the comments we may receive what has already been revised from the recommended budget that was presented on May 9th. And so in response to the conversation on May 21st, we've made a number of changes that result in about a $50,000 reduction in our general fund. And instead of a recommended tax rate of 62 cents per $100 of value, we're at 60.5 cents. And so, substantially the things that changed in the budget involve removing the school safety and support grant that's worth about $20,000, reducing funding for the Jefferson Street Park project by about $2,000, reducing our grant programs that run through our Community Appearance Commission and Historic Preservation Commission, each by about 25%. That's in total about $5,000. We reduced a new position request to only have 3 months of funding rather than 6 months. That's worth about $17,000. And then we also were able to make a few other adjustments going beyond what we talked about on the 21st. One is that we've gotten some grant funding for a mural that is going to move ahead using current fiscal year funding. So we adjusted that in the next year on both the revenue and the expenditure side to the tune of about $5,000. Our fire budget, we reduced safety supplies by about $14,000, a net reduction. We were able to add a couple of things, but mostly reduce a couple of things based on some purchases we were able to do with some current year available funds. And then, as I described a few weeks ago, we received some information on our insurance renewal for our property and liability insurance, and then a few other adjustments, and those all together resulted in about a net increase of about $12,500. And so again, that total net change on the recommended budget is about $50,000, and we now have a recommended budget in the general fund for next year of $5,339,277. And again, the recommended tax rate at this point, based on feedback from the board, is 60.5 cents.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Franzese. Board, any questions for Mr. Franzese ahead of the public hearing? Okay. Hearing none, I do have a few slides I want to share, but I'm going to do that, Mike, after the public hearing, prior to the next one, once we close this one out. So we will now open the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. I'll invite Mr. Sam Morgan forward. He's the first on the list. You will come to the lectern and repeat your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sam Morgan. I live at 310 Sowers Ferry Road. I'm here tonight to admonish the Spencertown Board and the Spencertown Manager for not seeking other solutions in an effort to solve the staffing problems of the fire department. You can't come up with any other ideas except to raise taxes on an already overtaxed citizenry. Shame on all of you. Nobody has been willing or able to address the real underlying cause of why men and women, for that matter, no longer wish to volunteer or make a career as a firefighter. Well, after talking with a lot of current firefighters, fire chiefs, retired firefighters, and those who once expressed an interest in becoming firefighters but changed their minds, I can tell you, it wasn't that long ago that the fire service and EMS were complete and separate entities. However, back in the late 90s, someone came up with a wild hair to combine them in an effort to provide better emergency service for the various communities. In the beginning, it seemed to be a good idea. The call levels were low and the staffs of the various fire departments weren't overworked or hard pressed. Fast forward to today. 80 to 90% of all calls made out of fire stations these days are EMS related. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what kind of negative impact that has made on responding personnel or equipment, especially when your fire department personnel are answering over 500 calls a year. The personnel are burning out and wearing out along with their apparatus. I am not the only one who believes that the fire department needs to be separate from EMS at the municipal level. This is a problem that has been discussed for several years according to newspaper articles and internet posts. EMS integration into the fire departments requires cross-trained firefighters. This limits career opportunities for those career EMS only providers. Likewise, there are a lot of firefighters who don't want to be paramedics. They just want to be firefighters. Some departments even require cross-training for promotion, meaning you have people who have no interest in being in the back of an ambulance becoming paramedics only to advance their careers, and that does nothing but potentially hurt patient care. Emergency management at all levels requires careful use of available resources. These days, every time you turn around, the prices of everything has gone up. The amount and levels of training and cross-training have increased to the point that very few people are willing to put in the amount of time necessary to learn how to become a full-time firefighter, much less enough to become a volunteer. I'll skip to the last. I personally and professionally, I think the town of Spencer would benefit in more ways than one if it separated its fire department from EMS. It would drastically reduce the workload on our personnel and equipment, thereby reducing costs and also employee salaries, and may even revive a sense of volunteerism. Sorry for the truncated, but
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, I do have a question for you, because I think that's a very compelling argument, and an argument that can't be achieved by Spencer alone. It has to be in partnership with the county. My question to you is, who would you propose cover the cost of EMS?
Again, it's not a catch-all for all communities. Some communities can bear it. Some others with budgetary concerns, can't do it. But I think that given the number of calls that Spencer makes, and it's over 500, most of those are, as I said, are EMS related. And a lot of those are frivolous or unnecessary calls. You've got apparatus running, 2, 3, 4 times a day or more, and which does nothing but burn out your crews and the personnel, and also put more wear and tear on your vehicles. I don't know what's called. I've talked to Deborah Horn about this, as various other people higher up. They don't know. They throw up their hands.
Yeah, I think the reality is somebody's got to pay for it no matter what. Even if you separate them, and then it's whether does county pay for EMS, that's still going to impact everybody's taxpayer dollars one way or the other. But I agree with you about overworking our fire staff, which is hindering the volunteerism.
I think there's a
completely.
solution out there regarding, again, this separation of EMS. And a lot of communities are doing it, even major cities. There was an alderman or a councilman in New York who's he's proposing this very same thing because of various problems. New York Fire Department sort of looks down on EMS as the ugly stepchild, and vice versa. There's a lot of conflict among the personnel. Other departments, they'll make their rookies run ambulance calls or EMS as basically punishment, and it sours their wanting to become professionals, either in EMS or as firefighters. It's not an easy solution by any means, but at one time they were separate. I think that it would behoove a lot of fire departments, especially the ones that are hurting for money like Ellis and some of these outlying areas. They don't get a lot of tax dollars, but I know from experience the wear and tear that it puts on our personnel and our equipment. So I'm hoping that somewhere down the line that we can diverge and have the county maybe responsible for EMS and let the fire departments concentrate on being firefighters. It would reduce so much in terms of the wear and tear, the burnout. You got kids these days, they inquire about wanting to be firefighters. Well, you got to learn all this cross training, okay? They don't have the time to do that a lot. And so you getting a much reduction, and nobody wants to volunteer to do squat anymore. So anyway, I appreciate you letting me speak.
No, thank you. Thanks for the ideas. Very helpful. All right, next is Mr. Tom Strini. You will come to the lectern and please repeat your name and address for the record.
My name is Tom Strini. I live at 15 Beauregard Drive in Spencer. I just would like to add to what Mr. Morgan said. If he is worried about burnout on volunteers, it's not going to be any different with paid firefighters. People are people. I have just general comments in terms of the budget. We're talking now about a 60.5-cent tax rate versus 55 currently. You may have seen in the news, the city of Charlotte and the county of Mecklenburg just went through their budgeting process. They were agonizing over a 1.5-cent tax rate increase. 1.5 cents, 3% for the city and 1.5%, I believe, for the county. We're looking at a 10% increase here for the town of Spencer. How many of you got a 10% raise in that last year? I didn't get 10% on my Social Security. How many of you have not seen any inflation? Do we want to add to the inflation that people are seeing? In your own personal budgets, I'll bet you budget the way I do. You don't budget more than you have because you don't have a bank you can go to get more money. I can't raise a tax rate if I want a bigger car. I have to live within my budget. My budget is what the income that I've got right now is. Because I'm no longer able to work, I can't go out and get a job. So it's only 5.5 cents. It's only 5.5 cents. Minimizing things like that says that there's not real good feeling for the impact on people. Now, I happen to be fairly well off. I think about the people in this town who aren't fairly well off, and for whom an extra $50 or $100 a year in property taxes is going to stress them. Every time I drive past one of the parks, I never see anyone out in our parks, yet we spend money building a park down on the railroad crossing. We spend money on murals. Now, I know we got a grant, but it's the principle of what is nice versus what is necessary. And what should be done is all of the things that people have requested, prioritize them. It's what we did in business. You start chopping off the ones at the bottom that are the least priority to do, and until you're at a point where you can afford to do them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Strini, a few comments on that. We don't typically respond, but I do think it's important for our citizens to understand. You mentioned about never seeing anyone in parks. I don't think that's actually true, because I do drive past our new Yadkin River Park and actually see the parking lot full quite often, which is a positive sign. But I will say all of those projects, park related, have been majority funded and almost 80% or more funded by grant dollars, not by Spencer citizens, by either philanthropic donations or by state grants. And so what I would say is we are in the murals too. Those things that are nice to have, we are not budgeting for nice to haves within our budget. We are going out and seeking grant dollars and other funding mechanisms, including private donations, to make those things happen. So to say that we are being frivolous and we're not spending that money wisely, we are fighting above our weight class for sure, but we're going out and we're leveraging other people who believe in the town of Spencer and believe in what we're doing. And so I am very proud of that, and that's something I will always tout and not back down from. The other thing about prioritizing, this budget is built upon prioritized projects and prioritized needs. We have a strategic plan that we put into place back in 2019, and we have been actively working that strategic plan. And so if you attend the various meetings and public community events that we've had, we've touted the accomplishments that we've made towards that strategic plan. We still have a long ways to go towards that. But some of those things are exactly what this budget is working to achieve. And they're not all nice to haves. Many of them are have to haves, including fire service. And so you can go back to Mr. Morgan's point. He's absolutely right. What we are asking our staff to do is above and beyond what they have traditionally been asked to do. And I think, it's not just Spencer, it's throughout all of our emergency services. The model has changed. What we've asked them to do has changed. And it is worth taking a look at. But that's going to take not just us, it's going to take all of the municipalities and the county, all of them sitting down and looking for creative solutions. But the reality is that takes years to happen. And so this is what we have to do right now from a fire standpoint to make sure that we are providing fire service, because I guarantee you anybody that is against this budget increase would not be against the fire department showing up to put out the fire on their burning house. And that's what essentially we're asking. And the other point I will make is we cannot be compared to Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte based on population. They're comparing apples to oranges. There's an economy of scale differential. And I'm going to present some of that here in a moment that's going to show some of that information. So Mike, let's go ahead and pull that presentation up.
Did you have anybody else to speak?
There is nobody else signed up to speak.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Anna, did we have any written correspondence received?
I did not receive any, no, sir.
Thank you. All right, let's see if I can get this to work. It is not. All right. I've put a few slides together because as we've gone through this, I think it's important to compare where we are with what we're proposing with our upcoming fiscal year and our tax rate. Compare that to several other of our peer municipalities in the county, as well as comparing it to the county. And so I want to walk through these here quickly, because the key is I want to show that we're providing value for the money that we are charging and the tax rate that we are proposing. Yes, it is an increase, but what I'm going to show you is a reasonable increase in line with other municipalities in our peer group and with the services that we are providing as a municipality. And so what you'll see here, it's a little tough to read, but what you'll see, Spencer is the first municipality listed. In blue, those numbers represent the proposed tax increase as a cents per $100 valuation. And you'll see that within the county, there are multiple communities that are proposing tax increases for this upcoming year. 55 cents for Spencer, 20 cents for East Spencer, 9 cents for Rockwell. I'm sorry, not 55, 5.5 for Spencer, 20 for East Spencer, 9 for Rockwell. Granite Quarry is not proposing an increase. 6 cents for China Grove, 4.9 cents for Salisbury, none for Landis, none for Rowan County. Another important metric here, countywide average is 5.7% increase per $100 evaluation. And the other thing I want to point out here is Millers Ferry Volunteer Fire Department, because they are the largest volunteer fire department adjacent to us. And they are actually proposing a 2.25 cent increase on their fire tax, which actually represents a significant increase, as I'll show you in a moment, for their fire tax. All that to show that we are not the only fire department in need of additional funding, as they are as well. And so what you'll see here is also in orange the current year tax rate, and then in green the proposed tax rate for the next year. I also want to point out I've added a comparison municipality at the end here. Mint Hill, we've heard that mentioned over and over again as a comparison with their rates compared to our community. And so I just wanted to put that up there for comparison's sake. They're not proposing an increase this year, and they have a relatively low rate at 22.5 cents per $100 evaluation. But I'll show you in a little bit why that is. But the key here, you'll see the dots. The dots represent the percent increase in taxes. And as Mr. Strini mentioned, yes, we're showing a 10% tax increase for the town of Spencer in 5.5 cents. The proposed East Spencer rate is up 30.3% as a result of them doing the exact same thing we are, going to a full-time fire department. And then Rockwell is proposing a 19.6% increase, and a 12% increase for China Grove, and I believe, what was that? That was a 9% increase for Salisbury, and then a 10% increase for the countywide average. So what you'll see there is we are right at the countywide average for tax increases at 10%. And we'll talk in a moment about why that is. All right. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide? I can't do it. All right. So another comparison is our 2025 estimated municipal ad valorem tax base and revenue. Okay. So this is comparing what our overall tax base is for our municipalities, and then what our tax revenue is based on our proposed rates, okay? And so the bars represent the estimated ad valorem tax base, how much our property within our municipalities is valued at, compared to then with the tax rate that we have, what the actual revenue on our ad valorem or property tax is. So we see Spencer there in gold. You'll see East Spencer, Rockwell, Granite Quarry, China Grove, Salisbury, Landis. And then I also showed Millers Ferry Volunteer Fire Department because they do have an assessed value based on their tax rate, and they have a pretty large service area. So you'll see that as well. So what you'll see there, Millers Ferry actually has a considerably larger tax base than the town of Spencer does. And again, a lot of that has to do with they serve a lot of lake properties that are valued considerably high, as well as Chewy, and then a variety of other properties throughout their service area. So that's part of that. Now, their revenue is considerably lower because they're only charging a fire tax, not for all the other services. The county is, those folks are paying county taxes plus the volunteer fire department tax. But you'll see there where Spencer is relative to all the others, you know, we don't have a high tax base. And you know, we have a reasonable tax revenue from that. But you look at some of the other comparatives, It really shows we can't compare ourselves to Salisbury just because their tax base is over $4 billion, and they are raising about $27 million in tax revenue. The other, Mint Hill, as we mentioned earlier, look at their tax base. Obviously, it's a very affluent area. Property values are considerably high down there. They have a tax base of almost $6 billion. And so, in effect, they're able to hold their tax rate very, very low to generate the revenue they need to run their town with $13 million in estimated ad valorem taxes. So you'll see it's not fair to make a comparison of Spencer or any small municipality to the likes of Salisbury or Mint Hill in this case. Next slide, please. This slide shows the per capita tax comparison. So what we've done here, obviously taxes are based on property and property value, but if we were to take those property values, our tax base, and we were to spread them over the population, the number of people we have, we can assign a tax per person that lives in our town. That's not actually what each person's going to be paying. We'll show a household here in a little bit. That's not what each household is paying, because you also have industry and businesses and things like that that are paying taxes. But if we spread that burden over the number of people we have, it at least gives us a comparison with the other municipalities around us that we can compare a per capita number. So what you'll see there, Spencer, with our 3,345 citizens, our per capita rate, tax rate is about $686 in property tax per person if we took all of our valued property and spread it across the number of people. What you'll look at is what's proposed for East Spencer. Well, that burden jumps up to $893 a person. Okay, so again, this is where we have to look at it not with our rates as each individual person in Spencer, but we have to look at the Spencer citizens as a whole. And the only way we can do that is by looking at what these kind of per capita numbers and average impact and those sorts of things are. So what you'll see is we're considerably lower than East Spencer's proposed new rate. And, they're doing the same thing we are, providing a full-time fire department. So when we talk about bang for our buck, we're obviously getting much more bang for our buck there with our proposed budget. Rockwell, their tax rate is lower. They have less citizens there, but they're about $567 per capita. Granite Quarry's $599. China Grove is ahead of us, above us at $710. Salisbury at $758 per person. Landis at $627 per person. Rowan County, I didn't show them in the previous one just because their assessed value is $20 billion plus, so it really wasn't a good comparison. But here it is, when you break it down on a per person level, $760 per person. Now, it is important to note that $760, you break that out, that would also have to be added to every other municipality in the county because we also pay county taxes. But as a point of comparison for services, it's a good number to compare. And then you'll see Mint Hill, again, is considerably lower, $471 per person, because they have 27,761 people, many more people than any of our small communities have, and they are able to spread that burden, tax burden and operating burden, over a much larger population. Next slide, please. This is important as well. It's a 2024-2025 household tax comparison. So we take the number of people, average number of people per household in 2024, and we say, all right, based on that per capita amount, what is the average household tax if we were to spread that over? But then also what we want to look at is what is the average household income within each of these communities? And so these are based on 2024 numbers, but using our 2025 tax rate that's being proposed. And what you will see there is the household burden in Spencer is $1,756. And if you look across, it's pretty comparable to many other municipalities. You'll see in the orange there, it's comparable. But what varies significantly is the income. And so I know we've heard comments about people in Spencer can't afford this. We have a lot of people, we're a highly impoverished area. The reality is the numbers don't support it. Anecdotally, we may say it, but if you look here, we're really not any different than the rest of the county. Our annual average household income in Spencer is $72,635, compared to our neighbors in East Spencer, where it's $55,417. And so we're asking our citizens, our households, to basically put 2.42% of their income towards property taxes. Whereas East Spencer is going to be asking 3.1%. Other communities like Rockwell are considerably lower, but their household income is also considerably higher at $76,526. Granite Quarry is a similar revenue, household revenue, but they're asking their residents 2.1% of the revenue. But then we look at other areas like China Grove. China Grove has a lower household revenue than we do. They're $66,381, and they're asking a higher percentage of that revenue from their citizens. The same for Salisbury. Even with a $75,239 a year household revenue, they're asking 2.41%, which is basically the exact same as Spencer. And then 2.43% for Landis on a $73,910 annual revenue. You'll see the county is considerably less. $59,717 is their household revenue for 2024, and the tax rate is 3.21% of that, or percent of that. Countywide average is similar, and so all that to say is we are really right there with all of our other peer municipalities. We're not out of line with what we're showing. We're well within reason. And then finally, there again, we'll show Mint Hill. Again, not a good comparison because their average annual household income is $110,214. Again, it is a very affluent area. And so because of that, property values are higher and they are able to raise more revenue. Hence, therein lies the problem with smaller municipalities in Rowan County. We have a lower tax base. All of that, though, is what we're working to change with the growth that we're promoting, and working to raise that tax base. Next slide, please. This is an important figure as well because we say, well, we're an impoverished area compared to other places. Our citizens can't afford a tax increase. Well, yes, our poverty rate is higher than Rowan County. It's higher than the county average. County average is 14.9. We're 17.15. However, we are considerably less than East Spencer, who's 30.5%. We are less than China Grove at 18.26%, and less than Salisbury at 23.32%. The ones that are low are Rockwell at 8.24, Granite Quarry at 11.84, Landis at 5.6, and there again, there's Mint Hill at 8.33%. So, are we an impoverished area? By all accounts, no. The census demographics do not consider us impoverished, but we are ahead. We do have a higher poverty rate than the county average. And so, that's definitely something we need to be cognizant of and keep an eye on. Next slide. The other thing, too, is we're saying that, well, we're asking our citizens to bear more of a brunt on the taxes. Well, in reality, that's partially the case. It's the case for 61.3% of our residents in town, because 61.3% of homes within our town are owned by residents. The remainder are rentals, almost 40%. Rentals, those renters are not paying the property taxes, their landlords are. Now, the renters are paying that through their rent rates. Obviously, the landlords have to recoup that. But when it comes to home ownership, yes, we are asking for our citizens to bear that cost. But we need to keep in mind, we're not asking all of our citizens to do that. We're asking 61.3%. Whereas you look at some of the other communities, some of the other communities have significantly higher rental rates, and some of them have significantly lower rates. You look at places like Landis, Rowan County even, and Mint Hill. You know, they're 75% for Landis are owner-occupied homes, 71% in Rowan County, and then 80% in Mint Hill. So again, it's tough to make a fair comparison to property values and home ownership and taxes when we have a 40% rental rate. Next slide. And finally, the other thing is what we've heard is, well, we have a much older population in Spencer, and we're asking folks on fixed budgets to make changes and have to increase their tax when their fixed budgets aren't increasing. That is partially the case, obviously, for anybody that is on a fixed budget, but the generalization that we have an older community, well, older compared to what? Because the numbers don't fully support that. Our average or our median age in town is 42.9, right? That's right in the prime of people's working years.
Did you take into account Crestwood Drive? Sorry. Be quiet.
But you look at our neighbors in East Spencer, they are an older population with a median age of 52.9. Some of the other interesting things are some of the other communities around us, like Rockwell, Granite Quarry, China Grove, and even Salisbury and Landis, are all in the 30s with their median age. So they do have a younger population there. So yes, we do have an older population compared to many of our peer groups, but not significantly compared to the overall Rowan County average, which is 40.7. And it is lower than Mint Hill, where apparently there are more people there on fixed incomes at 45.7 as the median age. Next slide. So what does this all mean? Well, it means a couple things, all right? The first, the message is everything costs more. We all see it. Mr. Stringy mentioned it. Everything is costing more when we go to the store, when we pay our bills. The reality is everything costs more, even for municipal government, because guess what? Our costs are affected by inflation as well. And it's no different than anybody in their own household budget. 2025, the U.S. inflation projection is 3%. Good news, it's a little bit less than it has been. Within the Piedmont, that's projected to be 4% in 2025. But the other thing that's come out is the North Carolina League of Municipalities, for municipalities, our cost of living for budgeting is 3.4%. Well, guess what? That's less than the Piedmont, North Carolina average. So I would say that from a doing more with less, we're doing pretty well there. And then also from a municipal merit increase, we have to though keep and retain and recruit good staff. And we've got a great team here, and so we have to make sure that we keep them. And so the 2024-2025 municipal merit increase across the board within our area was at about 2.7%. I believe we're a little bit higher than that. What have we proposed in the budget? 3% or 3.5%?
So we have a range for merit increase between 2.5% and 3.5% recommended, but we also, those are for staff that are beyond the target pay, which is the midpoint of their pay range.
Right.
There's just a handful of staff at that point. Most staff are within our developmental increase program, which is a flat dollar amount that splits the first 25% of the pay range into 7 increments. So roughly it's 3.5% is the budget figure. It's a flat dollar amount that some years it starts out higher than 3.5% and it ends up lower than 3.5%. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's
kind of sort of.
That 3.5%.
But I think the underlying message is there are staffs every bit worth that.
Absolutely.
And in 2024, property insurance in North Carolina, this is staggering, was up 42.2%. Well, guess what? Our insurance rates have gone up as well, and we have to bear that cost. And North Carolina energy cost in 2024, 8.5% increase was approved by the Utilities Commission, and another 3.8% for 2025. Guess what? We have to pay energy costs as well, and fuel costs, which have risen. So with all of those costs, the other thing we have to keep in mind, the intangible cost, there is significant competition for recruiting and retaining quality staff. So in addition to new positions for making sure we have a full-time fire department, we also have to make sure that we are recruiting for our openings and also retaining our top quality staff, and that takes money to do. we're not only competing against our peers around us, but we're competing against other municipalities that are a significant distance away, like Concord and Charlotte, but we're also competing against the private sector as well. We've talked about the full-time fire department transition. Obviously, that is the bulk of our proposed budget increase. And so, you know, the fact that we're able to do that with all these other costs is, I think, really telling the story that for 5.5-cent increase, our citizens are getting value for that increase. They are going to see tangible results. They are seeing tangible results with the things within our town, and they'll continue to. And then part of that is continued enhancement of local quality of life. And so when we talk about parks and things like that, we want to make sure that we have the opportunity for folks that are currently here to enjoy those opportunities for enhanced quality of life, but then also that it is a recruiting tool, not only for staff, but also for new residents and businesses in our town. And so we will continue to invest in that, but we will continue to seek out alternative funding sources, as we have done a great job of doing by funding those projects with private philanthropic donations and grants from private organizations as well as the state. Next slide. And so we talk about raising taxes and more money, and I think the reality is we are at a crossroads within our town, and it's an evolution of our town from sleepy Spencer to what Spencer of 2030 and beyond looks like. And so I think this is really important because the beginning of that graph is the year 1920. And what that shows is the growth of our town from that point in time through its evolution. And so obviously you see the distinct ramp up in our population when we were started due to the formation of Spencer Shops and kind of in its heyday. And then you'll see a significant drop off with the invention of the diesel locomotive and the closure of Spencer Shops. And then we had a rebound there for a period of time. And then we started to lose population again in the 90s and early 2000s. And so you'll see there, we had kind of within the last 30 years, we had or 20 years, I guess, we had a low point in 2015. But then if you look, we've been on the rise since then. And we've been on a steep incline with our population from 2019 onward. And so you see where we are in 2024. We have the largest population that we've ever had in Spencer. And the forecast, you hear Steve come before us each month. The forecast is that will continue to grow. You can go ahead and add another 350 plus people when the townhomes on Hawkinstown are built, plus all of the other things that we are seeing. So the question is, what will that number be in the future, and when will it be that number? Well, here's how we have success as a town, and here's how we lower taxes. It's through growth. The one reality, you've heard it, if you're not growing, you're dying as a town. And so the formula to lower taxes is an increase in population, goes hand in hand with an increase in industry and commercial growth. Those two happen together, they feed off of one another. And when those happens, what that equals is an increase in your tax base. What does that mean to you and me and all the citizens of Spencer? That ultimately means a lower tax rate, right? So as that population continues to climb, we're going to see our tax base go up, and we'll see that tax rate begin to come down. My hope is that we're kind of at a pinnacle for what that tax rate will be, and that in the coming years, we're going to begin to see that come down and see it come down considerably as we continue to experience more success. But what we have to, I think, we have to have our house in order, and we have to have the things that we have to have, like a fire department, in order for us to be able to experience this growth that we're seeing here. And the citizens that we currently have, we've got to make sure that we're continuing to take care of them. And by investing in a full-time fire department, those sorts of things, we're investing in the people that are here right now, not the people that are coming in the future. So with that, I've talked enough, but I had to prove to myself, I knew that that we were reasonable with what we were asking, that an increase, that we couldn't continue to do what we were doing with not, and not increase the rate to provide the services that we have to provide to our citizens. I commend the board and our staff for working to reduce it from the initial 62 cent. I appreciate Mr. Miller for bringing some suggestions to us, Mr. Howe, you as well, and the board for working together to come up with some recommendations, and then Peter ultimately for staff doing that. And I appreciate all the input that we've gotten from our citizens. I think, as we see here, it's never easy when you have to pay more, and we all are paying more with everything, whether it's at the pump, whether it's our insurance bills, whether it's our electric bills. But the reality is, the town of Spencer is paying experiencing those same increases, and the town of Spencer is paid for by the citizens of Spencer and the businesses of Spencer. And so ultimately, it has to be paid for somehow. And we've worked to cut any potential fat that may be in the budget. So it is a lean budget, but we are still committed to making sure that we are working towards our strategic plan. And we cannot give up on that. We cannot backslide as a community. So thank you all. All right.
Thank you for that presentation. That was very good.
Yeah.
May I make a quick point?
Sure can.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you putting that insurance information. I'd kind of forgotten about that. I think one real benefit we have here in town, that if you're out in the county, and I've had some conversations with people out in the county who've seen their property insurance go up, or had to, re-up a policy, or in some cases, the companies have outright withdrawn from North Carolina because they didn't get as much as they were asking for. I think you were asking for double that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so having a full-time fire department that's staffed, they have the higher ISO rating. You go out into other parts of the county, that ISO rating starts to get lower and lower and lower. Guess what? Your property taxes go higher and higher and higher because it takes them longer to get there. So they're paying for it in a different way. Maybe not so much fun way, because you have to deal with that. And I think the other thing is, in some of the folks I've talked with in other places who are in the fire department field, and I absolutely agree with what Mr. Morgan said. Maybe that's something that collectively, regionally, we can pursue, trying to separate that out. That's not something we can fix here tonight or next month, or probably even next year.
But we can be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I've heard it going the other way. I've had fire folks tell me that they think actually we're headed toward more centralized regional fire departments, simply because people expect full-time service. They should be adequately compensated for putting their lives on the line. And I think in what we're doing here actually puts us at the forefront of that, not behind the eight ball. I know. Excuse me. I mean, I know the increase is going to hurt. It's going to hurt us all. We're fortunate enough. My home, it's not going to hurt us as much as some. I know that. But doing what we're doing is going to help get where we need to go. And I just think the last thing we all want is to not do this, and then the fire truck doesn't get there in time. Someone gets hurt. Someone gets injured. A firefighter gets hurt. Firefighter gets injured. This is about safety. And as you said, I applaud what you guys have done. You guys did. We workshopped this. I watched from home the other night, and actually rewatched it after you guys had the meeting about getting it down to 60.5. I wish we didn't have to do it. I really do. I really do wish we didn't have to do it. But this is just the cost of doing business, unfortunately. And hopefully, as you mentioned, with the growth here in a few years, we can start to take this back down a little bit. Maybe next year. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah.
I think the other important thing to note, I think the comment was made that nobody's gotten a 10% increase in their salary. Well, yeah, that's right. But the reality is even a 4 or 5% increase in salary, or 3% increase in salary, is considerably higher than a 10% increase in your property taxes, right? You got to look at what the percent you're taking the value of, right? And so you can't just, it's not an apples to apples comparison. But the reality is everything's gone up. And I would love for us to be able to turn back the clock and everything not have gone up in price and cost and everything like that. But it is what it is, and we have to, as a community, react to it. But we have to react to it without without putting all of our strategic plan aside and backtracking. And that's what we cannot do. Yes.
If I may, just to speak to this idea about how our fire service has integrated medical services into what they do, that we can remember back to a time before I, was even around, but there was a time where the idea of an ambulance was the hearse from the funeral home coming to take somebody to the hospital, right? And so as that service has progressed, it's become apparent, and the model we use is about response times and it's about location, and it's a lot faster for somebody to come and help and provide a very basic level of service. We don't have paramedics, we don't have ambulances. There are some larger cities that do function in that way. That's not what we do. We are providing a basic level of medical service to get there and start the care while the ambulance is on the way. So I just want people to understand that is what, when we're talking about medical calls as it relates to our fire department, it's that first step to get there quickly. Our folks are there within a couple of minutes. If you were waiting on an ambulance to get there, I'm not going to guess the number, but it's going to be a lot longer than 5 minutes probably to get an ambulance to show up with an advanced level of care, right? So when we're talking about the fire service and medical calls, it's really about efficiency, that we have staff that's available, and we don't have a fire every day, thank goodness. And we have professionals that are trained in a way that can provide this service to those who need it on a daily basis.
All right, board, is there a motion to close this public hearing?
Make a motion, we close this.
A motion by Mr. Miller,
Second.
second by Ms. Sledge. All in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, that public hearing is closed. We'll now move on to the next one, and this is for 1006 and 1008 North Salisbury Avenue, a proposed rezoning to SFR 3 to allow subdivision. Mr. Blunt.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. I do have some presentations ready for you, but since we have such a small crowd tonight, at your pleasure, I can give you the presentations or just give you a quick verbal overview of these various issues to suffice the public hearing, and then at your Tuesday meeting, I could give you the full presentation. I'll do it either way you would like to do it.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, let's go here now. We can shorten it and do that. That's my fault.
Sorry about that.
The floor is yours.
You know I love to talk and do my podcast.
Those pretty slides that you can't tell the colors of.
Okay, the first public hearing tonight, first presentation, is for rezoning and a future subdivision of the property. And it's actually 1006 and 1008 North Salisbury Avenue. The applicant put the wrong address numbers on the application. That's how the wrong numbers got interpreted for a few of the slides, because I make these presentations as soon as we get an application. You've done one of these already before, so you know exactly what it has to do with. It is a property, a single property parcel of land that has 2 homes on it. Don't know how it happened in the past. It's no big deal that it happened, but they would like to subdivide it and dispose of the properties. They inherited the properties they'd like to dispose of. To do that, they have to subdivide before they can sell them. To subdivide, I can't allow a subdivision that creates an illegal lot. And because of the dimensional limitations of the current zoning classification, we are asking, or they are asking, that we rezone it to a different zoning classification that has a slightly smaller lot requirement. Once it's rezoned, then the subdivision becomes legal and we can move right through the process. There is the property on Salisbury Avenue. It's across the street from the furniture business. There's a better picture that shows you where the furniture business is. That one shows you the 2 houses that are located on that property. That's a street view of the two homes on the property. Nice little home. The circle that you see is where it is located on our zoning map. You can see that that strip of properties are all zoned for residential of different categories, SFR2s and SFR3s. So it is not a question of spot zoning. And that's about it for that presentation. Very quick, simple, easy to understand. I don't know if you've got anybody signed up to speak on this one, but I'll step down.
Okay, thank you. The board, we do not have anyone signed up to speak for this public hearing. Have we received any written correspondence?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll open the public hearing. As we have no one signed up to speak and have not received any written correspondence, is there a motion from the board to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All right, there is a motion and a second, or well, there's a motion from Ms. Moody and a second from Mr. Howe. All in favor? All right, all opposed? And that public hearing is officially closed.
And I failed to mention that the planning board voted unanimously to suggest approval by the Board of Aldermen, and we had a neighborhood meeting that the applicant showed up for, but nobody else did. Just for background information.
Great, thank you. All right, the next is a public hearing for Code of Ordinances, Section 35.07, maximum accrual of fees prior to requiring small claims court action.
This is to get you ready for a long list of technical fixes we're going to do to the Code of Ordinances. This one I ran across one day when reading through the ordinance on code enforcement. Our current ordinance requires, not suggests, requires that when fees accrue to the amount of $5,000, our code enforcement officer has to take it to small claims court. Nothing particularly wrong with that, except I happen to know that the $5,000 amount that's in there was set back when the limit for small claims court was $5,000. State level is now $10,000, but our local courts allow small claims actions of up to $7,500. So all we're suggesting we do here is change the $5,000 to $7,500, and it says up to. So at any point during the process, we can go ahead and take it to small claims, but because the language says we must take it at a certain number, we want the number to be as high as possible.
All right, board, any questions? All right.
Just one. So, Mr. Blunt, so it has to, if it's under 7,500, it has to go to small claims?
The way it's written. Now, there are lots of options along the way to enforce it. But the way our language is written now, it says up to or at $5,000, it will be taken to small claims court. And that's a good thing, quite honestly. It's a lot less labor intensive, legal intensive, cost intensive to handle a small claims action. And right now at right now it's $7,501, you go to district court. And that means you send that expensive guy that usually sits over there. You don't send me.
Okay. All right, so we'll open the public hearing. And again, with this one, we have no one signed up to speak. Any written correspondence?
I've not received any, no.
Okay, so board hearing that, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second. Close.
There's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mohammed. Gotta be faster. All in favor? All right, all opposed? That public hearing is closed as well. Next one is Development Ordinance Section 16.2-11 pertaining to fire hydrants.
This particular text amendment has to do with our particular fire hydrants in the town of Spencer and the fact that the hoses that we hook up to them require an adapter at this point. And in trying to solve that problem, our fire chief, who was here, has been working to identify the adapters and the funding for the adapters through our SRU funding resource. And during those conversations, it was pointed out that if we wanted the right kind of fire hydrants installed in our town, we needed to have it specified in our development ordinance. So the purpose of this specification is to put that language in our ordinance that says exactly what kind of fire hydrants we want installed. On the large development projects that we have going on to date, including the Hawkins Meadows project, we have verbally told all those developers that this is the kind of fire hydrant we want. So this again is a technical correction of our development ordinance so that we get the right kind of fire hydrants. Any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Blunt.
So if you will recall, I guess maybe 2 meetings ago, we had discussed using the allocation from SRU to buy the adapters. So this is the same reason, just to streamline and allow for more proficiency and quickness when staff are trying to attach to a fire hydrant. Nothing more, nothing less.
Thanks. And board, there is also no one signed up for this public hearing. Have we received any written correspondence?
I have not, no, sir.
Okay. With that, is there a motion to close?
So moved.
Motion to close public hearing by Mr. Muhammad. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Howe. All in favor? All right, all opposed? That public hearing is closed. The next one is Development Ordinance Technical Standards Manual allowing roads with 40-foot wide right-of-ways in limited cases. Mr. Blunt.
This one's going to be a little more complicated, so we have our wonderful PowerPoint to explain it. This is a plat of a subdivision called Bell Mead off Hawkinstown Road and 7th Street, the corner there. This is a plat from 1954, is when it was originally platted. And you see within that plat a road system, and then a lot of what appears to be very, very small lots. They're not small lots. That's just how they used to do it. When you wanted to build a house, you bought a certain number of those strips determined by how many acres you wanted. That map shows the roads that actually got built in that subdivision. They're in black. The yellow roads were platted, but were never built. And if you could see that up close, you'd see that along those platted roads, or along the built roads, a number of houses were built, not completely built out along those roads, but along the yellow roads, no houses have been built, or very few. There's 1 or 2 that snuck in there somehow. This shows the property that, in my opinion, is very difficult to build on until those unbuilt roads are built. So when people call me saying I would like to buy a piece of property and build on it, and I look it up and see that it's one of these properties, what I have to tell them is lot's big enough, it's zoned correctly for residential, probably perks for septic systems, you can dig a well, but you can't build on it till you build that road. And the problem that I'm trying to solve with this particular text amendment is that when they platted roads for that particular subdivision and several other older subdivisions in the town of Spencer and in our ETJ, they platted them 40 feet wide. Our technical manual that goes along with our development ordinance has road right-of-ways a minimum of 60 feet for residential subdivisions. All the new developments are getting built with that 60-foot right-of-way, with curb and gutter, with 9-foot wide paved strips, with sidewalks on both sides. And that's great. I think that's a good thing for Spencer, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. But it is stopping a lot of older parcels from being developed. You can imagine the cost and the inconvenience. This particular one is one I get calls on at least once a month, twice a month. All those pretty lots along that yellow road are owned by different people. So I get a call about a particular lot, somebody would like to buy it and build a house on it. And I tell them, great, build a road. Then they want to know how much the road costs. And I tell them what I was told many years ago, it's $1 million a mile. And if you do the math on it, it turns out to be a very, very expensive road. Plus, they have to acquire the right-of-way. There's only 40 feet of right-of-way. Our standards say you have to build on a 60-foot right-of-way. To meet our standards, you've got to acquire some more right-of-way. So what I'm suggesting, I'll skip through these, that was when I was just trying to identify properties along Hawkins Loop Road and Hawkins Town Road, fairly large parcels that can be developed in the future, but not without solving some of these right-of-way and road problems. So this is a cross-section from our current Code of Ordinances, not Code of Ordinance, Development Ordinance, and you see that it's a good cross-section for a rural road, and it takes 60 feet to squeeze all that in there. It's a little deceiving in that it might take a little less or a little more based on the slope of the property that you're building the road on. But for a general cross-section, that's showing a 60-foot right-of-way. I looked around to see what other right-of-ways were out there in the books. That's DOT's on a 45-foot right-of-way, no sidewalks. Again, the topography would actually determine how wide it needs to be to get the ditches in. That's a Kannapolis right-of-way for 50 feet. Just to give you an idea of what a 40-foot right-of-way looks like, if you can see where the ditches are on either side of Grant Street, really from the top of the hill on the left to the right-hand side of the ditch on the right, that's a 40-foot right-of-way. That road was built on a 40-foot right-of-way a long time ago. It's a narrow road. If you've been down that street and you meet another car, you're probably got to run off a little in the grass to get around each other. So 40-foot right-of-ways are not something we want to adopt citywide. But to solve the problems, I think we should for some of these areas. This is the Belmead subdivision looking to the west, I believe, yeah, from the west, on the what is Benson Street. Benson Street's a state-maintained road. It's a state right-of-way. Somebody has made it into a nice driveway, but it's supposed to go on back 2 or 3 times farther than what you see right there to serve other properties. It's 40-foot right-of-way. If you turn 180 degrees around and look from that same point back towards 7th Street, people have used it enough for access to the rear of their properties, but that's a 40-foot right-of-way. If somebody wants to build a road on it, they can't build it to our current standards because they don't have enough right-of-way. This is that one I showed you in Hawkins Loop Road that had the 10 lots on it that people keep calling about. The right-of-way is not where that gravel driveway is. The right-of-way is where those trees are. And that's 40 feet wide. So what I've done here is created a sketch, and I'll clean it up a little bit after hopefully you adopt it at your Tuesday meeting. Is a 40-foot right-of-way that does away with the sidewalks. I added the language down there on item 6 that defines that on existing platted subdivisions, historically platted subdivisions, that at the discretion of the zoning and subdivision administrator, that we will accept a 40-foot right-of-way. So that's what I'm suggesting. We make a text amendment that allows 40-foot right-of-ways in existing subdivisions.
So I've got lots of questions. All right, so a couple things. I mean, obviously, from the pictures, what we're seeing is, I mean, it's basically a shared driveway is what we're proposing goes in most of those cases. However, I've got concerns with the road width based on what we saw with Grant Street. For both Joel and Chief, from a fire truck perspective and from a garbage truck perspective, and I know we're talking ETJ right now with Belmead area, but this applies to everything. So where we have things like that, fire truck obviously still has to serve the Belmead area, maybe not garbage truck unless it's contracted, but is there going to be concern with 40-foot right-of-way with that road size and narrower ditches and everything like that with our vehicles getting in and out of there? The other issue I've got especially is on-street parking can't be allowed in those areas if that's the case, because otherwise it's going to keep emergency and service vehicles from being able to get in there.
Well, I don't have an answer to that, but I will tell you that the Benson Street that I showed you is a state right of way. It's not our right of way. It's a state maintained road once it gets built. It's not us maintaining it. They're not asking for annexation, and I can't imagine they will, although Tuesday night I'll present one to you just like this that is asking for annexation.
But a fire truck's still got to get back there.
Well, fire trucks will be there for mutual aid because it would be Ellis.
But it doesn't matter if it's ours or Ellis or, I mean, it's still a large vehicle. No matter who owns it, it has to get back there.
And all of the existing roads are on 40-foot right-of-ways. The roads, if we put in a 60-foot right-of-way for these road extensions, they still have to come in Tabor, which is a road built on a 40-foot right-of-way.
Well, that makes sense. I guess concerns.
This would only apply.
Joel, we
to
saw you
existing
try to pass that one off, Joel. He's like, no, you go.
So, and obviously the right, so the right of way may not impact the width of the lane, right?
Right.
But I can tell you Grants Street, when we go there, the community apartments, if we meet a car, the car has to go into the ditch. It's just not an option. And there's a lot of streets in town that are the exact same way, whether it's parking on the side of the street, oncoming traffic. And so I think the biggest problem is the width of the roadway,
right.
Not as much as the right of way. But it is tight. Obviously, our trucks are larger than some of your volunteer departments that have a commercial cab versus a custom cab, and they can maneuver a little bit better. I can tell you here in town, and we identified this yesterday, our tires, where the truck's so big, and the way it's making these short turns and trying to navigate, we're having issues with wear and tear on tires, and it's just because it's tight. That's my concerns. Obviously, I mean, a fire truck, we're not going to go off the edge of the road. We can't. With the weight being top heavy, I don't want to flip the truck. So any car that we, especially going emergency traffic, they're going to have to go into the ditch, and I hate that. That or not to pull off to the shoulder.
Well, what about cars that are parked?
Correct. And if cars are on the side of the street, there's nowhere for either one of us to go. So.
That's our main concern. That's what I was going to say. Is I mean, the lane width is more what we deal with. The right of way really doesn't matter.
But it all plays into that.
It does.
Right?
It does. As long as we have a standard lane width, most of it is the sharp turns in the corners and on-street parking.
And so the sharp turns in the corners, obviously wear and tear on vehicles, but also wear and tear on pavement.
Exactly. Or, you know, it's like our lead back, stuff like that, which we're a little bit different because we have trailers where they're a solid truck. But I can tell you from our new garbage truck perspective, it doesn't like sharp turns. It's a big truck. So, and it operates very similar to a fire truck. So, you know, I'm an advocate for all the room we can get to make sure, and if we want on-street parking in those areas, then we need that wider width in the center of the street.
So, I mean, I think that would have to be a stipulation of this, is there would be no on-street parking allowed. Yeah. All right, so here's the other question, because it plays into that. All right, if we're setting a minimum lane width, we're doing that at the expense of the ditch, which means we're doing that at the expense of the ability to take stormwater away from these sites. And so obviously it's less of a ditch. We're still showing the same depth and slope, so you're getting less stormwater that you can carry away. How are we addressing that in these areas? Because what we don't want are brand new roads that are overtopping because the ditches are full because we designed them to.
And that's why I didn't give it as a right. I gave it at the permission of the planning department, and we would look at those things. The roads that we have shown you in the slide projection are basically flat. So the ditches on either side, they don't have anywhere to go anywhere. They currently pond in the ditches until time allows them to run off. So the ditches need to be fairly deep, but as you saw on, let me get back to it.
You don't want them so deep though that when somebody runs off, they're stuck.
But as you can see from, I'm not sure I've got it really. Yeah. That one's got about a 2-foot deep ditch on the right-hand side and almost no ditch on the left-hand side. Again, a 40-foot wide, and it's 2 feet up this way. It flattens out as it goes farther down. I wish I had a better picture of a road, but that particular one is dead flat. It was an old cornfield 100 years ago, so there is no pitch in that at all. And Hawkins Loop Road pitches a little bit from the north to the south, but their ditches out there are almost non-existent. They have been, if they had good ditches to start with, they've infilled over the years and never been cleaned out. So basically the rainwater is falling on flat surface. It doesn't have anywhere to go anywhere. It comes to the south, comes towards Hawkins Town Road. Hawkins Town Road's got pretty good ditches on it. They got a lot of traffic, so the state does a little better job of keeping that one up. So I agree with you, and we can certainly add the language about this would only be allowed with no parking signs installed by the property owners. But again, there are options always. We can leave it like it is, and I can keep telling these folks they can't develop it, and then all that property is going to sit stagnant for years.
Yeah, I don't think that's the answer. I just want to make sure that we're not approving something that's ultimately going to cause problems and have people coming back complaining that we allow roads to be constructed that are constantly underwater, or people are constantly running off in ditches and things like that.
Well, that has been done in the past in contiguous Spencer. And if you ride around some of the
that doesn't mean it's right, though.
No, and I'd like to see those fixed at some point, but I'm not sure how you fix it after the fact. So I'm glad you're thinking about these things. But
Mr. Blunt, these would be state maintained roads?
the ones I've identified, going back to the original, those yellow lines are state right-of-ways for roads.
But they were not built.
They were never
The yellow
built.
ones were not built.
Never built. And that is something we don't allow to happen anymore. We now, once we approve a final plat that includes interior roads like this, like the Hawkins Meadow job, we don't give them any certificates of occupancy until they either get all the roads built or they put up a bond for the cost of the roads plus 25%. So if they don't build them, we'll build them. So we don't let it happen anymore on new development. But these things were, this one, particular one's done in 1954.
So if these are state right-of-ways,
The black roads are state maintained.
The black roads are roads, and they are supposedly state maintained. They're not maintained very well.
Yeah.
I guess I would add, everything outside of town limits would be a state maintained road.
which is
unless-
ultimately, those are ultimately maintained by the county through the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
State funds or the county maintains it. Mr. Blunt, but the right-of-ways in yellow, you're saying are state right-of-ways.
They're not our right-of-ways.
Okay, so then here's the question then. If they're not our right-of-ways and roads are built, they're going to be state roads. The state is going to expect them to be built to DOT standards. So we're not going to have purview over that anyway, right?
I've tried to put it off on the state, tried to put it off on DOT. Matter of fact, the one that, this particular one, they went to DOT and said, Spencer says you have to approve the road that we're going to build here. DOT told them no, Spencer has to approve the road that goes there.
But so what's DOT going to say when they're going to say, Spencer, you approved a 40-foot right-of-way? That's not acceptable.
DOT, if you go back to their old standards manuals before they adopted the stuff they've got now, had 40-foot right-of-way. Right. They now, as I showed you, they have a 45-foot right-of-way shown. It's dependent on the pitch of the surrounding land as to whether you can get your ditches in or not. It's going to be a gray area. I'm not suggesting that we take these roads on as town roads, although Tuesday, like I said, Lincoln Avenue, I'll be suggesting you take it early.
I have two concerns. To piggyback off that, my first concern is if it's not built to state standard, it can be a road, but it won't be state maintained. It will be a private road that those people inherit to maintain. And we see in this county and where I work and et cetera, that does not go well over time. I don't know I could support that on purpose. I think my bigger concern, and the idea behind this in getting more lots and letting people come into Spencer, especially if you're getting calls for them, I'm all for it. So if we can find a way to address this, I'm sign me up. My other concern is this. You mentioned that there's different ownership with all these lots. This is really an issue of ownership and a piecemeal issue. For example, if Betty Sue sells a lot, and I'm making up a name. So if there's actually someone out there, Betty Sue, it's totally by accident. But if Betty Sue sells a lot and Johnny Developer buys that lot, is Johnny Developer developing the road to that lot, or is Johnny Developer going to be required to do the whole road? Because that's a significant cost passed on to Betty Sue's grantee.
Let's say Betty Sue was buying the very far left-hand lot on that picture. Then she would have to build the whole road.
No, sure, of course, yeah.
If she were buying the first lot off of Hawkins Loop Road, she'd just have to pave it just a little bit
that's a concern
to get to her house.
Yeah.
And that has been the problem. Now, you're setting me up for Tuesday night very well. On Lincoln Avenue, the developer came in and bought 10 lots. And it's a totally different question I'm going to bring to you. It has to do with annexation and water connections. But there is a fairly narrow road that serves that area. That road is already paved, it's already there, but it's narrow. It's a very narrow road. So that some of these same questions you may raise, I'll bring that to you on Tuesday, asking you whether you want to annex it or not. And in the past, I've brought things to you and said, hey, let's annex this. This time I'm asking y'all to think about it.
So I mean, based on what we've heard, I don't think our board can make any type of decision on an amendment until we have direction or coordination with DOT, whether they're going to actually accept responsibility for a 40-foot right-of-way and maintain it, or if they're going to kick it back and they're going to say, no, we're not going to. I mean, I think that's what we've got to know.
These are all great things, and we'll talk more about them Tuesday. This is supposed to be a public hearing for this section.
Well, it's helping you get ahead of that, so you can do your homework.
I'll be ready Tuesday.
I guess this is a public hearing. We do have a resident. You live in the area, right, of Hawkinstown? I'd love to hear from you what you think about it.
I think you already checked yourself and put the Hawkinstown road 9 or 60 foot wide. Why do it again? Build it like it should be and go with it. Don't go in and put it on another narrow road. It's going to be a hard time if we're trying to shut down on the road. So don't put, if you're going to go and start something, then do it right at the beginning instead of building a road that the state may or may not decide to use, and who's going to pay for the road.
Have you heard from residents, other residents in the area about this same thing, or are they aware of it or not aware of it?
Yeah, well, actually, my grandfather-in-law's farm.
Okay.
And all of the heirs, they sectioned off and gave all the heirs of land.
Right.
And nobody's going to put up money to even run that street in there. So I guess they're trying to get city, state, or somebody to finance the road.
Okay, thank you.
Hawkins Town Road is a 60-foot right of way.
Right, but
Hawkins
all the
Loop Road
yeah
is not.
Right.
Just want to clarify.
Okay. Okay. Board, any other questions? All right.
Mr. Muhammad had a question about guardrails, but
yeah, on like some of the roads that we were discussing with like the ditches being issues, and then just in general for the safety of the residents, is it possible to put like the guardrails up to deter them from going in the ditches?
It is possible to do it. The problem is guardrails require additional right-of-way width.
Yeah.
So if you do that, it requires an additional flat area to put those in. So
just thought it'd be an interesting question to ask. You know,
yeah,
especially when we're talking, you know, about possibly trying to repair or fix some of the ditches situations that we already have versus, you know, accruing some more.
But if you put up guardrails and people have to go in the ditch to
I was
let
gonna
somebody
say.
pass, then you gotta
Kinda
keep another
Fire
problem.
There's no outlet for it, yeah.
A ditch is better than a guardrail, if you gotta hit something.
All right.
Good thought. All right, board, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, there's no folks signed up to speak. And have we received any written correspondence?
I have not, no, sir.
All right, so board, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Muhammad, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Moody, all in favor? All right, all opposed? And that public hearing is closed. Final public hearing is for adoption of the Yadkin River District Small Area Plan. This is fun stuff.
Yes.
All right.
Take
Yeah,
the
this one is fun stuff, and we are bringing this to you because the planning process is complete. We have a plan that has been presented to us. Staff thinks it's a nice plan. I have some hard copies if y'all would like to have one, but we also sent you a link so you could go online and take a look at it and get familiar with it. What we will be asking of you Tuesday is to adopt this as an official plan for the town as a part of our comprehensive land use plan so that staff can start using it in our decision-making process for this particular area. And I will walk you through this and then we'll comment a little bit on some online comments I have seen. This planning process goes along with our comprehensive land use plan that you updated in 2022. These are the various sections that tell us that we should be looking at this area as a special area and doing extra planning, which we have now done, and then use that plan to shape development in the area. The area that, this was a map out of the strategic plan that showed that particular area and suggested that it be handled in this way. This was a map that I presented to you sometime back showing the different zoning or existing uses in that area. As you'll remember, right now, that whole area that you see in the variety of colors on this map would normally be all black because it's all zoned industrial. And that really just doesn't make sense for the various uses that are out there. So we will be coming back to you with some suggested rezonings for the corridor itself and for the Old North Carolina Finishing Company property. In that map that I gave you last year sometime, that hatched part at the top is the property we're now looking at with this small area plan. This was my very amateurish first stab, only a little better than what our mayor scribbled on the wall in our conference room in there when we first moved in.
It's debatable which one's better.
It's still there.
But it's still there, just.
Still there.
I don't think it's going to come off. I think it's permanently there now.
But this showed the concept of taking that property that ran from the existing town of Yadkin, which was officially named that years ago, and then taking the Old North Carolina Finishing Company property that's on the northwest side of the railroad and Highway 29 and finding uses for it. And instead of us trying to continue using our hopes and dreams, our personal hopes and dreams, we hired a consultant to come in and help us through the planning process that created the ultimate plan that looks like this. That's the
Hold
cover.
on, before you go on.
Yes, sir.
Which was funded how?
The mayor wrote us a check. I don't know how it happened, but
It was funded by the state through a state appropriation through the county. Came to us for this.
Core, is that the core?
no, this is a little
No,
different.
this
They're all
was-
sort of
this
folded
was a
together.
direct appropriation.
Okay.
But the mayor, using his political acumen, talked to the county leadership and convinced them. Didn't take much convincing. They recognized the importance of this area, not just this particular piece of property, but all of the North Rowan area and the riverfront property to economic development for not just Spencer, but for all of Rowan County. So with the mayor's request and Chairman Ed's support, they had been allocated money from the state for these type of projects, and they designated $75,000 to Spencer to pay for this project. So as a budget issue, this didn't cost taxpayers anything.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
This is another one of those freedoms. You're gonna have a hard time reading. These are pages out of the plan, but this tells you the visions and goals that we started with in the planning process. We gathered public input through a variety of methods so that we could get a sense and a feel for what our current citizens thought this area should be developed as. We have, as you've heard, a private developer, Samet Corporation, that is looking to develop the property on the east side of the railroad into an industrial park. And this is sort of marrying it all hand in hand. And they were a part of this planning process. They came to the meetings and helped us shape, because they actually will end up owning this property. This map, I think, is best descriptive of what the consultants foresee that area being developed into. And this is the map that we will tout to developers and business people and Chamber of Commerce and EDC and everybody else as to what the dream is for this area. Now, when I come back as a ghost 30 years from now, it's not going to look exactly like this. Things will change over time. But this gives you a good starting point, and more than anything tells you this is a mix that the current market in our region will support. This isn't just our pipe dream anymore. This is a market study based small area plan that experts in the field have studied the economics of our region, and they say that this will be broadly supported and will actually get built instead of just being a sketch on the wall or something I've done. The part of this that I went back to my slides, you see that I had some stuff labeled as residential, but it really was sort of, in my mind, a secondary part of the plan. Their scope of planning shows residential as being probably 50% of the plan. And it's a mix of residential. It's a mix of single-family homes, townhomes, apartments, duplexes, quadruplexes. It's meant to be a high-density area that will appeal to a younger demographic that wants to live on the river or have riverview living, wants to have access to trails around the river, boating access so they can rent boats or put their own boat in the water, go paddling in this area. So a lot of it is residential, and that's a good thing for Spencer as we keep talking about the growth of Spencer. And if I was finished in time, I'll offer a few budget comments after the fact. But this is sort of a tilted view, the Google Pro tilt the image look so you can get a better picture of it and see what they're doing. It's a mix of residential, park areas, civic, commercial, and in the actual plan itself, you'll see that they give us examples of things that could fill these slots. And they're not suggesting we go steal Salisbury's best microbrewery and bring it down here. They're just suggesting that we find something similar to that. I'm a bourbon drinker, so I'd prefer a distillery, but whatever comes will be great. You see some water there shown. That little blue blob to the right was actually the water intake for the old plant. And for some reason, it's the cleanest water you'll ever see. I don't know how it's so much cleaner than the Yadkin River, but they want to maintain it as a part of a public lake out there. So just a lot of beautiful things. This is a close-up of the residential area, and you can see the mix of different types of residential. It goes as far as to show street cross sections and street trees and sidewalks and all those amenities. This gives you a count based on that plan, and like I say, it'll change over time, but it was a total of 547 housing units at our current average of 2.75 people per unit. That's another 1,500 people for the town of Spencer. All of this area is already in the Spencer town limits. So everything that happens out here will have a positive impact on us as far as number of people living in our town and property tax revenue. This was a little blurb that we wrote up, and they included it in the plan, and I highlighted one paragraph there that sort of sums it up. The Yadkin River District Small Area Plan envisions the transformation of a partially demolished 55-acre industrial site located on the banks of the Yadkin River into a mix of residential options, commercial spaces, public parks, river access points, and civic areas. And I won't make any promises, but along that same budget concept, private development will build this. It won't be the town of Spencer using tax revenue to build this. This will be a positive impact on our town as far as tax revenue. As I pointed out originally, the reason that we're asking you to take any action on it or not, plan's complete, it's sitting on the shelf. Hopefully we will look at it from time to time and try to make it happen. But in the interim, as your planner, I need to know that you support what's in this plan, because then I will use it when people come to me wanting to do things with property in that area. And I will say, our small area plan says this is the best use of that property. And therefore, I may or may not approve somebody's development plans based on what's going to be adopted in this plan. I'll be glad to answer any specific questions. Like I say, I've got copies in my office if you'd like one, or you can continue to look at the one online. It's an exciting time.
It is, and I want to point out too that we have our mayor's roundtable next Friday, June the 14th, you know, I really want to stress that the Rowan Chamber has been huge in advocating for this project as part of the overall North Rowan Connector project, which includes new interchange at East Spencer. But this is a significant part of that, and they've been very, very supportive in promoting that and very excited about it and helping get us in front of our legislators and everything like that. And they're doing the same thing once again next Friday following our mayor's roundtable. They're actually arranging a tour that we're going to be touring all of the sites as part of the Northern Rowan Connector, which will include the old finishing company site. And so we'll have state and federal legislators along with us on that tour. So very exciting stuff happening and starting to gain steam and gain support from not only folks here in Spencer, but folks all the way in DC.
And I think you need to have a public hearing. And then
We
I'll
do.
have some closing comments.
Do we, one question.
Yes, ma'am.
The town of Yadkin itself, how have they been involved with any of this?
It's an interesting question. I've gotten numerous calls from people that own property in Yadkin. Mm-hmm. And just like all of Spencer, at least half of that property is rental. It's not owner occupied. Mm-hmm. But even from the owners of rental property, they have called saying, hey, I hear y'all doing exciting things down here. Tell me about it, because I'm trying to decide whether to invest more money in my property or not, okay, or just let it continue to run down. So that's a good thing. Strangely enough, and I don't know exactly how it happened, the town of Yadkin is not even in our ETJ. Okay. And it was probably done when we actually were asked to annex the North Carolina Finishing Company property. That little piece just didn't get included in there. In earlier conversations with Rowan County about drawing some lines on the map and growth boundaries and things of that nature, and swapping some ETJs that we could give back to the county and they could give to us, at least at a staff level, they thought it would be logical that Yadkin would go into our
at an elected level. It's been supported too. Yeah. So
now, if you drive through Yadkin, you have to recognize that you're taking on some problems. But with anything good, you're going to take on some bad, and I think it would be to the benefit of the town to have that. So we'll continue to work on that too.
I actually looked at buying a piece of property down there before when I was looking to move back to Rowan County, so I'm familiar with a lot of little houses and some of the streets that are down there.
And there were a number of people that lived in Yadkin that came to the public hearings for the plan itself, so they had an opportunity to provide input.
Good.
forward. We do not have anyone signed up for the public hearing to speak. Have we received any written correspondence?
We haven't received anything officially. There's just been some comments on Facebook post about it, but yeah, it's mostly been people thinking that like they don't necessarily know what our plans are. If that makes sense.
It does. What I will say is Facebook comments wouldn't constitute, written would be a specific letter written to the board or to town staff in regard to the matter.
But echoing the tone of those comments, and after reading through them, I put a lot of deep thought into what they were basically saying. And you heard some of it tonight was that quit spending money on amenities, quit spending money on parks, take care of the things that we have, that we've lived here all our life, and we want you to do this instead of that. And that sort of comes full round to where I was tempted to sign up for public comment for the budget session. The mayor said it well with his slides and comments, but you have to recognize two things: that costs go up every year, and there's only 3 ways to deal with those cost increases. 3 ways. This is not an exaggeration. First way is reduce level of service. And you can do that. You can lay off firemen, lay off policemen, lay off planners, things of that nature. Save some money. Keep that tax rate down. You can raise the tax rate. And you're suffering through that Tuesday night. And you know that's painful as an elected official to do that. And then the third way is to grow your economy. And what gets lost in the shuffle every once in a while is that the way to grow your economy is with those amenities. Those very things that they're beating on is what will help us grow our economy. Without the amenities, we're not competitive in the market, and other communities are going to grow, and we're going to fall behind. There were some comments made about if you're in business and you've got a budget, you're going to stick to that budget. You're not just going to willy-nilly go out and spend money. I ran a business for 30 years, and I will tell you that certainly at budget time, you look and see what your expected revenues are and your expected costs are. And if the costs are higher than the revenues, you don't lay people off, you don't cut people's wages. You sit down and have a heart-to-heart discussion with your estimators and say, we need more work. We got to grow. We got to grow this business. We need more work next year than we had this year, or we're going to lose money. So businesses don't cut back and they don't hamstring themselves because of budget crunches. Successful businesses grow. And we're a successful business in Spencer. So it's time for us to get that mindset right.
I'd also like to point out that, it's kind of, you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. Yeah. Because for years, all we've heard is complaints about the finishing company needing to be cleaned up, right? What a mess it was. And that's exactly what we're planning to do, and getting other people, developers, to come in and pay for it, to improve our tax base, to clean all that up. So some of those comments I think are short-sighted, unfortunately.
We've talked for nearly 6 years now, I guess, about the fact that in order to get the kind of businesses that we want to come here, the restaurants and things like that, we need more population. And from those numbers, with what you had today on those numbers and what Mr. Blunt showed us on these numbers, that's getting us to the 5,000 population. And that's what we've said. We have to have at least 5,000 before anybody would even look at us.
And I will say that we have a board and a staff that sits before our citizens tonight and believe in our town and believe in the future and believe that we are great and we will continue to be great and even greater than we are now. I hope that some of our naysayers can see that, and that, because some of those naysayers are the ones that want to complain about Spencer not being great. And that's exactly what we're working towards. So it's just interesting. All right. No one signed up for this. We have not received any formal written correspondence. Is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Moody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sledge. All in favor? All right, all opposed? And that public hearing is now closed. All right, so we have reached the end of our public hearings. And so now we'll review our agenda for June the 11th. This should be a fairly quick one. What I will remind folks as we go through this, any items that we want to designate to the consent agenda, let's just make a note of those. I would go ahead and make a recommendation that there are a few of these public hearings that we heard tonight that we heard no one speak on that we should go ahead and put on consent agenda for Tuesday night. Invocation. Do I have a volunteer to give that on Tuesday?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right. Recognitions. I do want to make a recognition tonight that I think I'd like for us to maybe put a proclamation together in recognition of the anniversary of D-Day, which is today, the 80th anniversary. Thank you for suggesting that. But I think it would be appropriate for us to recognize that historic event in the world's history, not just our American history. Other recognitions that the board would like to make? Okay. We will have public comment and then approval of our consent agenda. Right now we have the May pre-agenda or the May regular meeting and May 21st called meeting minutes for approval. And again, if you remember, the May 9th was that Thursday. We did not have a Tuesday May meeting because of the election. All right. The next will be to consider amending Personnel Policy Article 3. In the interest of time tonight, Peter, I suggest that we cover that on Tuesday night. Is that acceptable?
That would be fine.
Okay. And then we have two grant awards, Salisbury Avenue Corridor Improvements, one for Spencer Deli LLC and one for Pinocchio's Restaurant. What's the pleasure of the board with those items?
Right, consent agenda on those two.
Okay, so we'll move those to consent. Next is the fiscal year budget, to consider adopting that. We can either do that by consent or we can do it as a part of the meeting. I think we've heard all that we're going to hear with that. We've talked about it as a board, so pleasure of the board, regular consent.
I'm comfortable with consent.
I would normally say consent, and obviously if it's consensus to put on consent, my thought is that just given the circumstances this year, one more opportunity for folks to come speak and perhaps us say final comments before.
Well, we can always pull it from the consent.
Okay, that's
right,
right.
because we'll do that after public comment. If there's a reason to pull it, we can. Okay. Next is to consider adopting ordinance 24-11. That's the rezoning of the two parcels that we heard, the single parcel that would be split to two parcels.
I'd say consent on that.
I would agree. Okay. Then the text amendment for the maximum accrual of fees, I would suggest consent. The board agree?
Consent.
Yes.
And then text amendment for the fire hydrants,
Consent.
consent. And then the next is the text amendment ordinance for technical standards allowing roads 40 feet wide. That should stay as a regular agenda item for further discussion and further information from the planning department. The next is to adopt the Yadkin River Small District or Small Area Plan. I would suggest that that be consent. All right.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
On the item regarding the rezoning,
Yeah.
that's the kind of item that will require the statement of consistency to be
That's right.
adopted.
Okay.
So, you know, it could be if you, is there a draft statement in the packet that if there's consensus on that statement of consistency at this point, we just would want to make sure that's also part of the consent. But just wanted to point that out.
I echo that, and although I don't expect anybody to show up, it's probably good to vote in public session to adopt text amendments and map amendments. The technical text amendments certainly fit in your consent agenda. And then the only question I would have about putting the Yadkin River District Plan adoption and consent is that I think you get a lot of viewership on your regular meetings. It would be a chance for the public to see the full presentation if we left it on the regular agenda.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, that works.
You know how I love consent agenda.
Trying to help you out.
And it is a very nice presentation.
All right, so the rezoning is going to regular, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
As well as the Yadkin River District
Right.
Small Area Plan.
right.
And all of our department heads can blame Steve for that. If the meeting runs long.
There you go, I have.
All right, consider adopting budget ordinance 23-14.019, that's reappropriating ARPA supplanted funds.
Yes, I can describe that at this point if you would like, and pulling up the right page in the packet here. Yep, so this is what we had previously talked about previously, related to the funding that we wanted to use towards the abatement at the old town hall building. So this is the budget amendment to go along with that, to just move it to the right account in order to accomplish that. And we've worked with the contractor on contract documents and that sort of thing, and this is kind of the last paperwork piece needed to get those funds in the right place.
Okay. Board, any questions on that?
So this will allocate the money for the demolition, I mean, for not demolition, but for the abatement of the asbestos and lead. And that will be
Yes,
done in this budget year.
That's correct. Current year funds.
Currently. Okay, any questions? Consent agenda or regular?
Consent.
Okay, consent. Next is project ordinance amendment 23-19.002, amending the downtown park project ordinance 22-018. And this is for the grants money received.
Actually, this is some other funding that we are recommending moving into the project fund. Part of that, about 28,000 of it, is some of our part of our ARPA supplanted funding project list. We had planned for other purchases. 25,000 would have been a second year of funding towards study about the Idea Center. We don't at this point see the need for the 25,000 to go towards that. And then the 3,000 was from the same place that the 59,000 we just talked about. This was the need there was 56,000, so that left 3,000 to go towards the park project. We're recommending adding. We had already planned on about $225,000 to go towards the park project, and so this would be 28,000 of those additional funding to go towards it, plus another $50,000 we had programmed into our operating budget this year, $50,000 for signage improvements, and part of that was to include the sign we want to accomplish with the park project. So this would capture those funds as part of the park project, so we can accomplish that as we're proceeding with that.
Does that have anything to do with the wayfinding signage?
No.
That's totally separate.
That is on its way too.
Okay.
They're starting to put them up around the county, and I think we finalized the plan, right?
We received.
Steve's laughing.
I'm trying to
We've
remember
almost
now.
finalized it.
Yeah, I believe most of it has been approved, and they were putting it out to bid. But so what we don't know yet is the outcome of the bid process that the TDA was going to do to have it, produced and installed, etc.
All right, so board consent or regular agenda?
I'm comfortable with consent.
Yeah, just moving the money.
Consent agenda it is. All right, then we'll have two presentations. I can't wait for this one.
Me either.
Possible modifications to our livestock ordinance.
I'm getting
Again,
big.
this is based on some of the comments we've, and emails and correspondence we've gotten from community members about revisiting our chicken ordinance.
Oh.
So it's definitely worth discussion. And so we've given that to Mr. Blunt to work on.
You have a slide
Steve,
presentation
if I
on
wanted you
that
to
one?
add goats into this, not just chickens, could you also add some goats? Oh, good. I don't want a horse. I'm just gonna get Murphy a goat.
Yes.
Or 7.
Need a slide presentation.
The kind that pass out when you scare them.
Only if they stay on your roof or in a tree. There's some
Well, the
goats-
tree fell down, so I guess it's the roof.
No, I missed that. Was that peacocks you're talking about?
No, goats.
Goats.
Oh,
I want the goats that pass out when you startle them by accident.
oh, the fainting goats, yeah.
Put something soft down for
All
them to
right.
fall.
So we'll have that presentation, and then we'll also receive the presentation Mr. Blunt was referencing about possible annexation of the 8 lots on Lincoln Avenue.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, so we also have a copy of an agenda item.
Yes.
Was put at our places.
I'm sorry, I was going to just say before we finished, I forgot to communicate that well. That's it's just to get authorization. It's file.
And I can jump in there.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so our police department, from time to time, will use federal funds for reimbursement towards bulletproof grant. And we've been trying to clean up prior year grants for a few years. And we finally been able to do that. And we're now ready to request some additional new funding to go towards bulletproof vest purchases. We've found out that there's a quick turnaround deadline of Monday in order to kind of renew for the next cycle. And so we are seeking this evening if y'all could authorize staff applying for that grant.
And that's just for the application, not for necessarily acceptance of it once
Correct.
we find out. So, okay. Board, any questions on that?
So this doesn't actually become an agenda item for
It would
Tuesday.
not. They need
Okay.
to, yeah, we need
Okay.
to vote on it tonight.
All right.
So is there a motion to authorize the town staff to apply for the 2024 grant period?
I'll make a motion to do that.
All right, it's a motion for Mr. Miller. Is there a second? Second for Mr. Howell. All in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, that's approved. Okay. We then have departmental reports. Mr. Blunt made a suggestion to move those to consent agenda. I'll leave it to your discretion, board, what you want to do with that on Tuesday.
We probably should hear from them better than that.
Very good. So we will hear those departmental reports, and then the town manager reports, and then requesting comments. Do not know of any need to go into executive session at this point. Okay. And then we'll adjourn. And I don't know that we have any need to go into executive session tonight. Is there any reason? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Muhammad.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Howell. All in favor? All right. All opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you all.
I